will please take the roll.
Council members Edberg,
Here.
Walsh,
Unmuting here.
Engstrand,
Here.
Jones.
I thought Dan was here.
Oh, Bean.
Not yet.
Here.
So Mr. Jones isn't in yet, right?
Here we go. He's coming in.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, then let's move on to approval of the minutes of the April 13th, 2021 meeting. Are there any corrections to the minutes?
Dean will move approval.
I'll second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Clerk will call the roll.
Council members Bean,
Aye.
Walsh,
Aye.
Engstrand,
Aye.
Edberg,
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to minutes of the council work session on April 20th, 2021. Again, any corrections?
Walsh will move approval.
Jones, second.
I have a motion and a second. The clerk will call the roll.
Council members Walsh,
Aye.
Engstrand,
Aye.
Edberg,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Bean.
Aye.
Thank you. Next is the approval of the agenda. Any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Councilmember Edberg.
thank you. If the first item on the consent agenda includes approval of the audit as a part of the comprehensive plan, I would like to remove it from the consent agenda and make it its own special item, please.
Okay. This is, all right. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, we will make that I guess we'll make it under new business. We'll make it 9C. Move it. All right, so do I have a motion to accept the agenda?
Edberg moves.
Jones, second.
I have a motion and a second. Clerk will call the roll.
Council members Edberg,
Aye.
Engstrand,
Aye.
Bean,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Walsh.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to visitors and presentations, 4A is the Friends of Jack Yost Park and the Adopt a Park program. And before we start, who was Jack Yost? So I found out that he's a 30-year veteran of the White Bear Lake Fire Department. He served from 1941 to 1971. He's best remembered for his work that led the department to include a rescue squad or an EMT unit. His impact on the department was significant. He created many tools and methods to improve the department's ability to save lives. He was a well-respected authority on the issues related to EMS and was often asked to speak on this. And one of the early versions of the Jaws of Life was crafted by him. I thought that was an interesting piece. And I can take no credit for this information. Sarah Hansen from the Historical Society provided me with these details, which I thought we should talk about him before we talk about the park. And now moving into there's an Adopt the Park program. And for the last 2 years, the YMCA Youth in Government has adopted Lakewood Hills Park. And this year we have a young man from Lincoln School. He's in 4th grade over there, and he's in their exploration program. And his name is Henrik. And he decided, he was concerned when the trees were gone that so they called to find out what was going on. And Andy Witecki from the Parks Department talked to him about this. And this young man adopted Yost Park. I suspect he's got a little help from the parents, but I could be wrong. So anyway, I'd like to introduce him. I'd like to introduce him. I have a couple of questions. If I can ask you a couple of questions, is that okay?
Yeah.
So, I understand you created a spreadsheet to track the work you're doing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Wow. Now this is dedication. And so why did you want to adopt a park?
It was mostly because we wanted to help out with the trees being replanted and just general. Oh,
We spent a lot of time in that park.
Yeah, we can see the park from our house. And so
Okay.
we spend a lot of time there. We
Yeah.
skate there in the winter. We are over there.
So it's your
throwing-
park.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
our park, and we feel a real connection to it. And we know it's well loved and well used, and we want to do something to contribute.
Well, I noticed one thing. I know because Serenity Care Center sits across the street from the park. It's well used by the residents and their families. They have picnics, they take walks there, etc. So the fact that you want to make it even better is really appreciated. That's a great thing. Would you recommend that other people adopt some of our parks in the city? Do you think this is a good program?
yeah, I think it's really helpful to the community, and it's just I mean, it's fun.
Good.
I love it.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for doing that. I wanted to highlight what some of our citizens are doing in town, some of our younger citizens. And here's some pictures of what they've been doing.
So Serenity was part of the reason we picked. Henrik can tell you what the first two projects we did, but it was chosen partially because of Serenity. We know people walk over there and sometimes are pushed in wheelchairs. And what can you tell them what we did?
Yeah, the first project we removed sand and dirt from the side from one of the on one of the paths, and kind of cleaned that up. And our second cleanup was towards the back of the park. We brushed off some sticks, dirt, a bit of sand, and kind of cleaned that back area up a little bit too.
So we
That's
want to make it
wonderful.
easier for people to walk and push wheelchairs and strollers on the pathway.
Yeah.
That's wonderful that you've done that. I mean, and and as I'm sure you've been told, we will get trees into the ones we took out because those trees were diseased. And so we will be planting new trees. So you'll be a part of that when we're ready to put the trees in. So we for sure want you there. So is there anything else you'd like to tell me, or does the council have any questions for this nice young man?
Anything else?
Well,
Just
then,
many thanks.
yes.
Madam Mayor, I just would like to send my note of appreciation also. I don't have any questions, but my note of appreciation is very sincere.
It's amazing what young people can do when they set their mind to it, isn't it? This is pretty nice. So Henrik, we thank you so much, and we thank your parents for helping you achieve this. And we look forward to talking to you again on another date. And thanks again.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thanks for
Bye.
having.
Bye.
Bye.
So that program, if anybody wants to do it, all you have to do is go to the city's website and search for Adopt a Park program. The application is on there, and I would encourage people to take a look at it because it's a good program, and we'd love to have your help. So with that, we will move on to item 4B on our agenda. And so this is the auditor's report of 2020. So we have Brad Falzak here to talk to us about that. So Brad, are you here? There we go.
I am. I was trying to unmute. I don't know. Carrie, did you want to say anything ahead of time? No? Okay, you're good. Well, that's quite a headliner that I get to follow up. So I don't think I'll be quite as.
You're not gonna be this is exciting.
That was pretty cool. So, but so is the audit. So here we go. So I am here to present the audit of 2020 financial statements. So 2020 was quite a year, a lot going on with the CARES Act money coming in and trying to spend that within a short time frame, figuring out how to spend it. So had a lot going on, but overall, I think had a pretty good year financially. So what I'll go through tonight is the audit opinion on our responsibility. We'll talk about the general fund results, other governmental fund results, enterprise funds, those results. And then at the end, we always have those comparisons with cities of similar size across the state, as well as comparison of cities within the county. So we'll go through those. So just getting started here with our auditor's opinion and responsibility. It is our responsibility to audit the financial statements and give an opinion on them in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. We are issuing an unmodified or a clean opinion on the financial statements. So it's the opinion you're looking for. In arriving at that opinion, we'll look at your internal controls. We look at, make a determination on whether we believe that based on our tests, whether the items, the amounts are stated materially accurate and presented in accordance with government auditing standards. So we are issuing a clean opinion on those issues. One thing we had to do in addition this year was a single audit. And what a single audit is an audit of your federal awards or federal expenditures. If a nonprofit or a government spends more than $750,000 of federal dollars in one calendar or one fiscal year, they're required to have a compliance audit done on those expenditures. So they require us to take a look at different compliance requirements that the federal government puts out that says you got to spend this money in a specific way on certain items, and the controls and stuff have to match up so that you don't misappropriate those funds. So we went through those compliance requirements, and we are not reporting any non-compliance with the federal money there either. So within within your other reports, report that you got sent out is the single audit compliance report. And within that is a schedule of expenditures of federal awards. So there's a number of different federal dollars that you spend, and you'll see it in that report. But we are required to audit a specific dollar amount of your federal awards, and the CARES Act money met that requirement. So that's the program we audited, and that's one we concentrated on, which $1.9 million of just over $2 million that you had spent on federal awards. So we audited primarily all of the awards you received. Then the state auditor requires us to go through a series of checklists of different statutes that they want us to test as well as part of our financial statement audit. So we went through those checklists, and we didn't find any non-compliance with state statutes either. So those are things like, are you entering into contracts appropriately, doing the correct bidding requirements? Are you, how is your cash and investments deposited, invested, those types of things? If you're issuing bonds, are you following the state statutes that are surround those types of things? So, and again, with those, we aren't reporting any non-compliance. So in all the opinions, they're clean all around. Any questions on any of those? Or on the single audit? It's something new that don't typically see. Your city doesn't typically see a single audit. You did have one this year, and with the American Rescue Plan dollars coming out as well in this year, those will be spent over the next, I think through 2024, you have to spend those. But if you spend more than 750 in any calendar year, then you would require to have another single audit. But I think Councilmember Edberg.
Yes, Mr. Fausak, would you prefer questions on those reports now or later after you've made the larger audit presentation?
Sure. On the reports themselves, we certainly can take those now.
All right. So I do have a question from the single audit report.
Sure.
We handled approximately 1.9, actually, well, 1.9 in CARES, and then some CDBG and some other, some HUD funding and so forth. So it's something over 2 million. I noticed one line in there that said that the city opted not to take the de minimis 10% indirect cost charge that the federal government allows for grant administration. Did that mean, okay, so I know what indirect costs are. I know what indirect cost recovery is. Do I interpret that to say we could have taken about another 200,000, which would have reduced our program expenditures, but would have compensated the city for our time in administration, but we chose not to do that? Am I reading that correctly?
You used all your money for direct expenses, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? Okay, then we'll move on.
This is just a slide just to report, prior year finding, we did report a finding on payment of claims last year, not paid within the time frame. That we didn't find any non-compliance with that this year. So that's been cleared up. Again, we didn't have any findings reported this year. And Councilmember Edberg, just to follow up with that, typically, I don't know if I've seen in my 20 years organization take that 10% and not use it all for direct aid or direct costs. But
You're referring to city organizations, right? Governmental organizations not
Yeah.
taking,
Yep.
okay, fair
Yep.
enough. If we were a nonprofit handling a federal grant, the story would be very different, but I accept what you're saying.
Sure. Okay, now we'll get into the financial results. So general fund, this chart looks at your budget on the top line. That red line's your budget. The gray shaded area is your fund balance policy, and that's a minimum 35 to 50% reserves in reserve for your following year's budget. You were slightly under that in 2018, 2019 increase, and then 2020 you're at 47.9%. So increased from 40 to 47 in 2020. Where those increases came from, this is your general fund original budget, final budget. You can see from your original to your final, you did put those CARES dollars in that final budget. So overall, revenues came in about $400,000 over what you had budgeted. Expenditures were about $400,000 under what you'd budgeted. So a net budget variance there of $806,000. Overall revenues over expenditures of $1.3 million in your general fund. You did transfer some dollars into the general fund, almost $1.4 million, which was approved in your budget, original and final. Then you transferred out about 1.8. A lot of that 1.8 that was transferred out went to your economic development fund, and those were the dollars you used the CARES money to support your eligible general fund expenditures that were eligible for CARES money. Then you transferred those savings out to your economic development fund to support economic development within the city. So primarily what the changes there. Overall had about a $900,000 increase in fund balance, finishing at 5.8 million. Chart here shows where your revenues are coming from in your general fund. Obviously, most of your revenues are coming from taxes, which you've seen slight increases over the last 3 years. Charges for services have stayed pretty consistent. With that intergovernmental, you can see that jumped up again with those CARES dollars coming in. And then the other category would include your transfers and any sale of capital assets and those types of things. Expenditures, fairly consistent overall here. You can see the biggest change was in the other category. And that's where that transfer out to the economic development fund would show up is, again, with those savings from using the CARES dollars for eligible general fund, public safety primarily expenditures within your general fund. We were able to free up some money and move that out to the economic development fund. Capital project funds. Here are the kind of bigger changes with the last two ones. We'll start at the bottom, the sewer improvement, the water improvement funds. Both of these funds were closed in 2020, and the remaining reserves in those funds were closed out to the sewer enterprise and the water enterprise funds. So the sewer fund received about about $500,000 in cash. Water fund received about $370,000. The other capital project funds, so these are funds that are set aside for equipment purchases or different projects, capital projects within the city. So overall, have about $17 million in fund balance for your capital project funds. Majority of that is in your community and reinvestment in your construction funds. Special revenue funds. So you have 6 of these funds outstanding, which these funds are funds that have a restricted or committed revenue source. So a restricted revenue source would be an outside party is restricting how this money, how the revenue source needs to be spent. A committed revenue source would be something that council has determined this revenue stream must be spent on a specific thing. So we have these 6 outstanding, about $5.3 million, $5.4 million of fund balance outstanding. You can see a big increase in your economic development fund there, again, with the transfer in from your general fund. Sports Center fund had about $170,000, $180,000 decrease in fund balance at year end. Likely that had a lot to do with COVID and being shut down a lot of the year. Debt service funds, I'm gonna make this a little bigger. I might lose the title, but hopefully you can see it a little bit better. Your debt service funds, so these are all the governmental debt service funds you have outstanding for your governmental type bonds. Here we want to make sure that you have enough cash and assets to support the debt service requirements going forward. The chart on the bottom shows your debt service requirements for the next 10 years. So blue is your principal payments, green is the interest payments. So this doesn't include the bond you're looking at issuing currently, but this would be anything outstanding at year end. So about $18 million of bonds outstanding for your governmental type operations. And these bonds go out to 2041. 2020 bond goes out the furthest there. So getting into enterprise funds, your water fund first. Top chart looks at your operating receipts compared to your operating disbursements. So the blue is your receipts, the gray is your disbursements. You can see the increase receipts from 19 to 20 increased quite a bit in this chart. You did increase rates about 3%, and you did add the infrastructure charge, I believe, last year. So that really would increase those receipts. Your expenditures also increased. That had to do with the water tower. That was considered maintenance, so that it was included within your operating type expenditures and not a capital type expenditure. So that's really what the increase is in disbursements. The lower chart down below, you can see your cash went from 212,000 to just over $1 million. Some of that had to do with the transfer in and closing that water improvement fund. That was, again, like about $370,000 coming in. The rest of it was just the increase with that infrastructure fee and building up those reserves. Sewer fund, similar story with the sewer fund. Operating receipts have been meeting operating disbursements each year within the sewer fund. So fairly consistent from year to year there. With your cash balances on the bottom, 19 to 20, 655 to 979. Again, transferred in about $480,000 of when you closed out that sewer improvement fund. So that's really what the increase in the sewer fund came from. The refuse fund, this has been about breaking even each year, just from about $1.4 million of receipts and disbursements each year. Cash has been staying fairly consistent from year to year at $218,000, had a slight decrease this year, but that's what we're looking to see, stable cash balance, no real jumps or unexplained decreases there, so fairly consistent. The red line, I should have explained that earlier with some of the other charts too, but the red line is a minimum target, and that's really based on 50% of your operating expenditures in any given year. So taking a look at, you'd want to have 50% on reserve, just in case revenues aren't coming in for whatever reason, you're still able to make your expenses. With the way the refuse fund works, this is probably higher than what it would really need to be, just because of the activity and how it flows through the system. So with the ambulance fund, 2017 and 2018 both had zero cash balances. In 2019, increased cash to 311. Had a slight decrease in 2020 with 246, but you can see at the top chart there, your operating receipts have been supporting your disbursements. 2020, you were slightly under, which the cause of this decrease here, but for the most part, you've been holding steady with your receipts and disbursements. License Bureau, each year presented 17 through 19, your receipts have been meeting your disbursements. 2020, your receipts were under your disbursements for that year. However, your cash did increase from 177 to 220 this past year. Your minimum reserve decreased because your operating disbursements decreased. So you are above that minimum requirement or that minimum target balance. And this red line isn't something that is, it's a guide that our firm is saying. It's not something that's in statute. It's not something that's recommended in any government accounting book or anything. It's just something that we have included in our reports. Pioneer Manor Fund, again, for this one's pretty stable the last 3 years with your receipts and your disbursements. Cash has been pretty stable, 303,000 in 19, down 4,000 in 2000, or 299,000 in 2020. So this fund's been pretty consistent from year to year. Your internal service funds, so these are funds that centralize costs that are spread throughout the city. So these funds charge other departments costs to support these specific functions, your insurance and your employment expense. So both these are in total, you have about $2.7 million in net position. You can see your receipts and disbursements. Again, receipts have been meeting your disbursements, and your cash, total cash in the two funds, $5.3 million at year end. Now we'll get into so this last chart is just your total cash in the city and how it's broken out, or how it's to be spent. So the lowest color here is the general fund, is that darker blue. Get into your capital funds in the red. So the majority of your money is within your capital project funds. Then we get into the special revenue funds, debt service, enterprise, and then internal service funds. But this breaks it out. You can see the biggest change probably from last year would be in your capital project funds. Now we get into some of those comparisons from your city and others, your peer group. So you've always had very favorable results in these comparisons. This year is no different. Your tax rate is, the city of White Bears is the blue line. The green in each one of these charts is other class 2 cities across the state of Minnesota. So other cities with between that, I think it's 20,000 and 80,000 population, 85,000 population. And then we also break down in the purple there, other cities that more resemble the size of your city. So that 20 to 30,000 population city is in the purple. So, and then the gray is other cities in Ramsey County. All compared to all three of those other peers, you're at much lower than what they're at as far as a tax rate. So what citizens are being charged on their market values of their property. The lower chart there, taxes per capita, again, similar story there. What each resident is paying on average, $290 compared to your peers are at over $500. These two charts look at your outstanding long-term debt. So the top one is your long-term debt per capita. So this is all the debt within the city divided by the population. And you can see again, much lower than your peers, especially your peers in that 20 to 30,000 population size city. Debt service expenditures, same thing there. Lower debt load there, you're going to have lower debt service expenditures. Again, compared to all your peers, you're lower in that category. This chart, the top chart looks at just your general or your operating type expenditures. So taking out all your debt, all the debt service requirements from you and your peers, as well as any capital type expenditures. So just operations on a day-to-day basis, how much are you spending per resident compared to your peers? So definitely the bars are a lot closer here, but you're still operating at less cost than your peers. You can, at 2020, you're at $534 per resident, where looks like Ramsey County is the next lowest at $683. So quite a bit lower in that category as well. Capital is going to vary. So this is going to just depend on the different projects you have going on from year to year, but this is going to vary. So in 2018, you had a lot of projects going on. 2019, not quite as many, but 2020 had about the same as 19 as far as projects. And these would just be your governmental type projects. So taking out any of the enterprise type stuff that's going on. And our last chart breaks down your expenditures by function and compares those to peers as well. So again, in just about every one of these categories, other than transfers out, and again, you had quite a bit of transfers out, but that was all related to the CARES Act and moving that money to economic development. But all other categories there, you're less than your peers or very close. Revenues at the bottom, this just shows where the revenues are coming from. So you can see your peers have quite a bit higher per capita. I guess we've already looked at that chart anyway, but just reiterate it here that what you're receiving per resident for taxes is much less than your peer group. So that's all I had. I'll take any more questions. This was our group, but any more questions on the actual financial results? Or if we want to go back to the reports too, we can do that.
Anybody? Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a general question, not even about our audit. So our audit is great, no issues. Congratulations, good for us. What as I sit here as a city council member, you read the paper, that some city ended up with a huge problem that they didn't know about. It came out, years later, and you think, what were they doing? What questions weren't they asking? If I was a council member, what did I miss? I mean, do you have other clients? Do you have other cities that you do where you have an audit that's like, wow, there's some issues here, there's some trouble. What does that look like? And maybe what if you can think of, even if it wasn't yours, but a city that went wrong, where did it go wrong? What antennas should we have up? What should we be looking at?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm going to try to bring you to your debt. One of the things I think some cities don't realize is when they're approving and issuing debt, what the long-term effects of that's going to be. I think a lot of cities, well, all cities are presented how debt is going to affect their tax rates and what the payments are going to look like in the future. I don't think it always resonates with council until it's time to increase that levy to support that debt when it really hits them. So I think when you're issuing debt, make sure you're just paying attention to what are the long-term impacts that debt's going to be on the taxpayer. And if there is issues within that debt where you need to levy for it, which a lot of times you do need to levy for debt, that you understand what that looks like. So it's not a surprise when you come to the budget time and you have to increase the levy for one reason or another. And let's say it's a 10% increase, but that should have been known when you issued the debt, because a lot of times those increases are related to or debt issues. So I would certainly pay attention to the debt and how that's impacting. I would pay attention to if you see your enterprise funds, like your water and sewer funds, especially if you see year after year declines in your cash balances. Sometimes those aren't corrected soon enough, and they get to a point where council's looking at 15 to 20% increases in their water or sewer rates just to turn it around, because it's been left where they don't want to increase their rates or don't want to really, they feel like they're giving residents a break by not increasing their rates. And then they have some drastic measures to do just to turn around to break even. So those are some of the areas I would take a look at, or where I see most cities find themselves in financial difficulties too late in the game.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have one comment, 3 questions, and then just one response to Mr. Walsh. So a nearby North Ramsey County community got in trouble because they borrowed money and issued bonds and didn't realize that the city was obligated to take on the debt when that project, which is a very large recreational facility, went under. I would call that incompetence, but that would be one place where not paying attention to who is obligated to pay debt in the kind of bonds that were issued would be one example of something that we would want to be careful of. Mr. Foldesek, it seems that in my reading, so I've tried reading all 3 of the reports that were sent out, that there's a slightly different format this year. Maybe my eyes are getting old and I'm just not remembering, but I actually appreciated the older format. And I'll specifically note that with the individual funds, there used to be a fund by fund analysis with recommendations on adequacy of reserves, when we might want to be looking at making changes, et cetera. And maybe I didn't see it, but I didn't see it in the reports that were sent to us this year, and I missed that. Could you give us just a quick summary? We have adopted your recommendations in the past of increasing rates for sewer and water and other various funds. Could you guys just give us a quick overview as to whether there are any of our funds that bear that particular watching at this point, or are the fund balances sufficient in all cases?
Sure. I don't know if I wouldn't say probably in all cases. We did change the format. We changed it last year though, and it was really the presentation that I'm doing tonight is where we changed it. We moved it more to the graphical format and not so much the narrative detail. But you're right, it did change. So as far as we're looking at the fund balances, I think with the tax increment pool, this came out of a deficit this year. So this is a positive cash balance. So all your capital project funds are doing well, depending on the outlook of those though. You do have a long-term plan, your financial management plan, that you look at these and project them out. So that's where I'd really point to your long-term planning. However, right now your cash balances are fairly stable in these funds. So these funds are doing well at the moment. But again, not looking at your long-term plan, looking at that is where you're really going to have to make decisions on the long-term planning of these. I mean, maybe this $4 million, it looks good now and it's pretty consistent from year after year. But if you have a $5 million project next year or 2 years from now in your long-term plan, which I don't believe you do, but then that wouldn't be sufficient, right? So
hopefully we would know whether we've got a 5 million plan. Yes.
Right.
So thank you. That gives me what I need to know. So then talking about debt financing and you had one chart, just a little bit debt per capita, debt, city debt in the city compared to neighbors or others, et cetera.
Yep.
So we had about $16 million in borrowed funds and debt that we had a year ago. We added 3, brings us to 19. I wasn't clear on, there was a statement about a state limit about limiting us to 98 million or something. We were clearly well within that. Could you clarify where our debt stands relative to any state state mandated caps or limits or anything like that?
Yep. Sure. The state, there's a legal debt limit out there. The state says you can't issue more debt than 3% of the market value within the city. And what debt is applied to that debt limit is if your debt is paid entirely from a tax levy. So if you have other revenue sources like special assessments coming into that to pay that debt doesn't count against your debt limit. So you take the market value of the city, total market value of the city, multiply by 3%. That's where that 98 million comes from. And then you apply any debt that's applicable to the debt limit against it, which you only have $3 million of your 19 million that's not being supported by another source other than tax levy.
So then the interpretation is we don't have any issues with any state mandated caps or limits. We are way, way, way below, well in compliance there.
Yep.
And according to the chart comparing us to other communities, the fact that we have gone up significantly in dollars per capita, at least significantly by our historical standards, we are still well within the norm for communities of our size in Minnesota. And I didn't hear you issue any concerns or warnings or any, hey, be thoughtful here. Did I miss anything like that, or do you have any words of wisdom for us?
I don't have any cautions. I don't have any cautions to tell you about your debt.
All right. That takes care of my questions. Thank you very much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Any of the other council have questions, comments? If not, I think we can owe a great debt of gratitude to our finance department. Once again, they've done a fantastic job and positioned us to come out with a good audit. So with that, thank you so much for being with us tonight, Brad. It was a pleasure seeing you again.
Thank you.
And we will move on to the next item on our agenda.
I'd just like to say thanks to Carrie and her staff too, and all the work that they did. It was made a smooth process this year, and we got it turned around fairly quickly. So it's nice to get it all wrapped up a little early this year too. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, you are early this year. We are ahead this time. So thank you again, and thank your staff.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night. All right, we will move on to 4C. Connie Talon from our engineering department is going to bring up the stormwater pollution prevention program. So I will turn it over to Connie.
Okay, I will share my screen. Can all of you see that?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Well, thank you, Madam Mayor and council members, for the opportunity to talk tonight about the city's MS4 general permit and stormwater pollution prevention program. So I will start tonight with just some background information about the MS4 general permit specifically. So what is an MS4? So MS4 stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. And that is defined as a system of stormwater conveyance that is owned and operated by a public entity. And that stormwater conveyance could be streets, curbs and gutters, ditches, and storm sewer that all convey stormwater to our lakes, streams, and wetlands. And MS4s in Minnesota must satisfy the requirements of the MS4 general permit, which is issued by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And this general permit is on a 5-year cycle. And currently we are at the beginning of another 5-year cycle. The permit was just reissued in November of 2020. So the purpose of the MS4 general permit is to, quote, reduce the amount of pollution that enters surface and groundwater from stormwater conveyance systems. And this is accomplished through the implementation of what is called a SWIP, or Stormwater Pollution Prevention Program. And this program has 6 overreaching categories or components, which the MPCA calls minimum control measures, or MCMs for short. So those 6 minimum control measures are listed in this slide. And in addition, if the MS4 discharges water to an impaired water body, there are additional requirements that we must accomplish as part of this stormwater pollution prevention program. And tonight, because for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through each of these 6 minimum control measures and talk about what we've done in the past year. This is in your packet, so you can read that. And if you have any questions about that, you can definitely feel free to contact me at any time. I will also put this presentation on the website for the general public to review as well. And if they have questions and comments, they can address that through the website. So tonight, I'm going to just focus on the impaired waters requirements. And I want to focus on that specifically because of all of our discussions regarding East Goose Lake. I thought it was very timely to talk about impaired waters requirements right now. And then also just to talk about some of the new reporting requirements as part of the new reissued MS4 permit. So I'm going to skip down to slide 24 right away. So the Impaired Waters Program at the MPCA is now linked in with this MS4 general permit. And the purpose of that Impaired Waters Program is to restore lakes that are impaired for very specific pollutants. So those pollutants include nutrients, sediment, chloride, bacteria, etc. And the MPCA creates a list of impaired waters, and they do this by testing. They do a lot of testing on the different lakes, and they determine which lakes are impaired, meaning they do not meet very specific water quality standards that the MPCA sets. So this list of impaired waters is also known as a 303D list. So as I go through this impaired waters information, I really want to focus as an example on East Goose Lake because of all these discussions we are having with that lake. So on the right, I thought was a really nice graphic that Vlamo created. And this is showing what a nutrient impairment is. So East Goose Lake is on the MPCA impaired waters list for a nutrient impairment. So on the left, you can see the above water and below water photo of East Goose Lake. And that underwater shot in the lower left shows green algae. So that's what it looks like when it's nutrient impaired. There's so much nutrients that a lot of algae grows. There's almost zero visibility. It kills the native vegetation. And as a result, also decreases the diversity of fish species and other wildlife. On the right is Birch Lake, which is also in our city, that is not impaired for nutrients. So you can see the above water and underwater shot of Birch Lake. That underwater photo is taken on the very same day as the East Goose Lake underwater photo. It shows a clear lake state with vegetation and a diverse fish population. So that's an example of a nutrient impaired lake. They're both shallow lakes, so they're very similar types of lakes. So each impaired water that's on this MPCA list requires an assessment to determine the sources of the impairment. So this process is known as a total maximum daily load, or TMDL analysis. So a TMDL identifies a couple of things. So it identifies the source of the pollutant, and it also establishes a maximum amount of a pollutant that a water body can receive and still meet water quality standards for that defined pollutant. So through this TMDL process, a waste load allocation is developed that assigns the allowable pollutant loading from each contributor. So each entity that discharges water from its MS4 system will receive a waste load allocation for each impaired lake. So here again, this shows Goose Lake and the nutrient impairment and how green that lake is because of that. So specifically, the city is assigned waste load allocations for all of these water bodies. So the upper list is nutrient impairment. So when we talk about nutrients, we're looking at phosphorus specifically. There are other causes of nutrient impairment, but we mainly focus on phosphorus. So these 6 lakes, let's see, 7 lakes, excuse me. So Bald Eagle Lake, both East and West Goose Lake, Coleman, Lake St. Croix, Peltier Centerville Lakes, and Wilkinson Lake, we are assigned a waste load allocation. And East and West Goose Lake are the only lakes that are actually within the city. So our East Goose Lake example, again, So the East Goose Lake has a TMDL, and it is assigned a waste load allocation of 64.7 pounds per year of phosphorus. So that number is what we are allowed to discharge from our MS4 system into that lake and still have it meet water quality standards. However, our current phosphorus loading into the lake is approximately 102.7 pounds per year. So that would require us to reduce phosphorus loading from our MS4 by 63%. And these waste load allocations are watershed loads only. East Goose Lake's a little unique because it also has an internal load. And so this waste load allocation is for watershed load only, but the city is also responsible for the internal load reduction as well. And then we also have waste load allocations assigned for bacteria and chloride impairment. So those water bodies are shown at the bottom of the screen. So MS4s that are assigned waste load allocations specifically for nutrients or total suspended solids only. So we, as part of our MS4 general permit, we must submit a compliance schedule for the 5-year permit cycle and also report the pollution reduction progress annually to the MPCA. So because this permit was just reissued in November, we have to fill out an application. And as part of that application, we have to complete a TMDL spreadsheet. And I have an example of that on the screen. You don't have to read all of this, but I just want to show you what we have to include in our application. So this is an example again, just for Goose Lake. So as part of our application, we have to say what we are going to do to reduce our phosphorus loading to East Goose Lake. So one column is the description of what we plan to do. So some of these items are implementing projects such as rain gardens or other infiltration practices. It could be a planning process. So I added this East Goose Lake Adaptive Lake Management process in this list. Staff training counts, workshops and clinics, the Adopt a Drain program, and then also all of the VLAMO cost share program projects that are completed, we can get credit for our meeting our waste load allocation. So as part of this application, we also have to anticipate the number of practices that we're going to install and the expected implementation years for that. So this application was just submitted to the MPCA and is under review right now. And it will be going on a 30-day public notice where the public can review it and comment on it. And after that is complete and we've addressed comments, then they will issue the next 5-year cycle permit, hopefully by July this year. And I also mentioned that every year we have to submit an annual report to the MPCA on all of our programs that we're working on. So specifically for the impaired waters, we have to submit this annual report on pollutant load reductions. So the previous 5-year permit, we only had to report for Bald Eagle Lake, Coleman Lake, and Lake St. Croix. This 5-year permit cycle, now we have to report on all of the water bodies that are impaired for nutrients where we have waste load allocations. So now that includes East and West Goose Lake as well. So an example of what the annual report would look like. So say we put in this curb cut rain garden that's in the photo. We as a city would calculate how much phosphorus that rain garden can remove in pounds per year. And we put that in the annual report. So we are listing all of these things that reduce phosphorus to try to get us down to the city's waste load allocation of 64.7 pounds per year. So that means for East Goose Lake, for watershed loading, we have to remove 38 pounds per year from the watershed to meet that waste load allocation. So the MPCA wants to see progress. We have to report on this. They don't have specific requirements of how much needs to be reduced in the permit cycle, but they want us to show progress. And I just want to note with East Goose Lake, there are some very large, very expensive projects that we could put in at the end of a pipe, for example, and really treat an entire sub-watershed. It's very expensive, but we can get that loading down much quicker than putting in individual rain gardens, for example. So this just shows a list of requirements in the new permit for MS4s that are assigned to waste load allocation specifically for bacteria or chloride. So we have both. I won't go through all of these items. I just wanted to draw your attention to the first two. So for our waste load allocation for bacteria, we have to adopt an ordinance that requires pet owners to remove and dispose of pet waste on city-owned land. And then for the chloride waste load allocations that we have to adopt an ordinance requiring proper salt storage at all commercial, institutional, and industrial facilities. So there's other new requirements for this, but this is just the main ones. And I'm not sure what'll even happen in the next 5-year cycle. We may have more reporting requirements for bacteria and chloride waste load allocations than we do now. They do tend to ratchet that up each permit cycle. And that's all I have on the impaired waters part of the MS4 general permit. Like I say, this will be on our website if anyone would like to review this again, and review all of the other minimum control measures also that we've been working on. Are there any questions?
Yeah, so I was going to say, council, any questions for Connie? Well, I'm not seeing any. So, Councilmember Edward, did you raise your hand? Yes.
So thank you, Connie. When will the council, or let me ask it this way. So we have a range of control options that we could initiate, a bunch of strategies and tactics. When will we be seeing those, and are those staff decisions or are those council decisions? And what's the time frame for looking at that plan?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Edberg, are you talking specifically about East Goose Lake?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so the VLAMO and the city are partnering right now on the East Goose Lake Adaptive Lake Management Plan, or process, I should say. There will be discussions at future council meetings about that process. Currently, the only step we're taking right now is community engagement. So we're gathering input. So you will be, I'm hearing a report from VLAMO soon on that. And then just depending on if council and VLAMO board would like to move forward with an actual plan that would identify these BMPs or these projects that would reduce phosphorus in the watershed and potentially internal loading, that would be determined through that process.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, if not, once again, thank you for presenting this tonight. And for the public, please go on our website and take a closer look at it and comment if you have any thoughts on the process. So with that, thank you, Connie.
Yes, thank you. Have a good evening.
All right, we'll be moving on to land use, the 6A, the consent agenda.
Move to approve, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Clerk will call the roll.
Council members Bean,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Engstrom,
Aye.
Walsh,
Aye.
Edberg.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to ordinances, second reading of the critical water deficiency ordinance. Mr. Copy, I guess this one's yours, huh?
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So this is the second reading of the critical water deficiency ordinance. So this is the final requirement that the city needs to complete before we can have our water supply plan approved. So a water supply plan is required by the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources for any water supplier or that serves a population of 1,000 or more. It's really just a tool for the DNR to help manage all of the water usage and issuance of permits throughout the state. It includes a description of our water system, where we get our water from, how many people we serve. It includes emergency preparedness plan in case of anything happening to our water system. It includes a water conservation plan. As you know, that's an important step in reducing our water usage, including different, fixture change outs for homes. It includes, different watering restrictions for our irrigation systems. And then the final component for Twin Cities metro area, we also need to complete our demand projections for future growth. Because we are so condensed in the metro area, the DNR is trying to look at overall water usage and what that demand is through 2040 in this plan. So again, the last step in us completing all the requirements for this plan is to adopt this water deficiency ordinance. If the council adopts that ordinance tonight under the consent agenda, we would also ask that council adopt the completed plan. That way we can sign the final certification for that plan, submit that to the DNR, and we will be complete with this process. In order to adopt this ordinance as well as the summary resolution, we will need 4/5 vote tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you. Council, any questions for Mr. Copy?
Madam Mayor, I do have a question. I don't know if it be for Mr. Copy or for the attorney, but the item 1 in the ordinance mentions non-agricultural land. I wanted to confirm that if a resident of ours was growing food, for their personal consumption, that would be considered agricultural.
Good question.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor and council member, where are you seeing that language?
It's line 1 of the actual ordinance, which says the ordinance shall include the following restrictions: outdoor irrigation of yards, gardens, golf courses, parklands, and other non-agricultural land. So I'm
talking subdivision 5A.
I'm talking the last page, but I'm sure it's also 5A in the middle.
I don't know.
Yes. So it'd be on the.
Yeah, I don't know.
So, Madam Mayor, if I might.
Sure, please.
So if you're talking, council member, a backyard garden, that wouldn't, in my mind, constitute agricultural land. I mean, I think that the idea of this is truly meant to be farmland, designated as agricultural land for tax purposes, typically is how the statutes refer to that.
Then I must say that I have a problem with this ordinance then, because I think if someone is growing their own food, we should not be able to restrict them from maintaining that if it's for their own personal consumption.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, again, as we had stated at the first reading, this is enactment of this critical water deficiency ordinance would take a governor's order and would be an extremely dire case of which the likelihood is, very slim. So in that case, it's really looking at that, life safety as far as life safety and sanitary conditions for water usage.
Madam
Does that
Mayor,
help?
I think Mr. Bean's point is still valid, but my question is, do we have a choice? Is it really a state thing? And if so, why are we even bothering with this? Not to be offensive to Mr. Copey. This smells of state regulation that it doesn't matter anyways.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Jones is, generally correct in the fact that this is, a requirement to pass our water supply plan, which is required by the state of Minnesota. So, in simple terms, it is a requirement.
So is the same water police going to come in and enforce as when we don't abide by the DNR? I can't even say it with a straight face. Sorry. But I agree with Councilmember Bean. I mean, if it's that dire, I'm trying to grow my own food. I got, other problems, but.
Then maybe people should start using rain barrels and stuff and saving their water.
Have to have some forethought for that.
Well, I know, but it's possible. We had a big push, I think, of several years ago on rain barrels. We were getting them at a discounted price for residents to purchase. Just saying.
Madam
Well,
Mayor?
I mean, I think this is for when there's something, I mean, this would have to be like parched ground. I mean, it would have to be going on for be like the Dust Bowl, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be what we're talking about here? I mean, is something really, of course, after we've come through a pandemic, it's pretty hard not to think unusual things can happen, but it would be a pretty severe drought. It wouldn't just be in White Bear Lake. It would be a statewide drought, whatever. Am I correct?
And Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'd like to also add that in such a circumstance, we would be looking, as Paul had indicated, at life and safety issues relative to water pressure, our ability to have if it got to be such an extreme case, we want to make sure that water is limited in its use so we can have certain pressures for just water to drink and also water for fire safety as well in those circumstances. Now, again, I think in all of this, we're looking at very extreme cases. Nevertheless, I think that's the logic behind that.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Madam Mayor and Council, I'm looking at the statute and I agree certainly with the, in my lifetime, I don't recall the governor having issued one of these emergency orders for this purpose that would have triggered that. But nevertheless, as you pointed out, Mayor, strange things are do happen from time to time. And looking at the statute, this is a mandate. So this is something the city does have to do. But looking at the language of it, and frankly, I think we were working off of, it was either a model or this is a pretty common language for this sort of ordinance. But in looking at the statute, it says the restrictions must limit lawn sprinkling, vehicle washing, golf course and park irrigation, and other non-essential uses and have appropriate penalties for persons who don't comply. I don't mean to suggest this I don't know, Paul, if you have any particular timeline in mind here or concern, but if the council is so inclined, we could go back, if you want to lay this over until the next meeting, we could go back and look at this and see if we can categorize growing of food, classify that as an essential use, and therefore exempt it from the restrictions. I can't guarantee we can get there, but it looks like from a first blush, non-essential is watering lawns and things like that, things you don't really have to do. Whereas growing food, I think, is legitimately, possibly could be classified as an essential use that would not be subject to this. So we could look at adding language to carve that out as something that continues to be allowed even into these rare circumstances.
Okay. That's something council would like to do?
I would prefer to do that. I would prefer to if we have a resident that's growing their own food, I would prefer that they continue to be allowed to do that.
Okay, but you realize that might not be the case. It may turn out
At least we tried.
Yeah,
Can still
absolutely.
vote against it.
Pardon?
Can still vote against it.
Well, yeah.
I mean, why they even ask? I mean, anyway.
Okay, so let's hold this over. Can we do it in 2 weeks? Bring it back, Mr. Copy?
Madam
Or are
Mayor,
you on a
members of the
timeline?
council, I'm going to direct this question to City Attorney Gilchrist. We are under the guideline to adopt this by the end of April in order to meet our overall timeline. That's why we had the ordinance on the schedule. Do you see any issues with legally extending past that deadline?
Well, I'm not familiar with the deadline, so if it says we have to get her done by the.
Then you got to get her done.
Mayor, Councilmember, I guess, in point to Councilmember Bean's question, Mayor and Council, if I could suggest that based on Mr. Gilchrist's assessment, would it be, could we just strike that particular language and reword it as we navigate it through this meeting, just to reference land that's otherwise grown for, I don't know how you would want to word that, but otherwise grown for food?
But that's going to be a slippery slope. I can see. I mean,
Based on the interpretation, I think at this point.
Each person's going to interpret themselves whether they're, you know, they could have a little tiny plot of 3 tomato plants. you know what I'm saying? I don't know how you enforce something like that. But Councilmember Bean, you have something?
I was just inquiring about an amendment that would recognize a personal garden consisting entirely of consumable
fruit of food
is considered to be agricultural in our interpretation.
But I don't know if it is in state statute.
Then
I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Right.
So.
Then we can do it that if we get pushed back after the fact, that's
yeah. Then why are we even voting on it? This is dumb. I'm sorry. It's just not the matter.
Well, we had a month. You guys had this a month ago to look at. So we should have been doing it then. I mean, this should have come up then so that we wouldn't be here on 2 days before the deadline. So I don't know. I think, well, I don't know if it's going to pass. Quite frankly, Councilmember Edberg.
Madam Mayor, so Mr. Jones, the city is a ward of a creature of the state of Minnesota. Once you accept that fact, this gets a whole lot easier.
Then why? Okay, thanks.
Well, you don't have
for that.
It's
education.
It's part of the deal.
Okay, thank you.
That doesn't, well, if we have an April 30th deadline, which is Friday, I don't see how all right, let me ask this question. Mr. Copy, if we don't approve this, where are we?
Madam Mayor, Mr. Gilchrist has I don't know if he has a clarification here.
Okay.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I'm scrambling here to come up with some language. Try to get this done this evening. My thought is on subdivision 5A, the language that we're talking about, that speaks of outdoor irrigation of yards, gardens, golf courses, etc., be prohibited, period. Then we would add a line after that. This prohibition does not apply to vegetable gardens used primarily to provide food for
personal use or some families.
For persons living on the same property or something like that. How does that? Persons living on this on
that work? I think that works. Anybody? Councilmember Bean.
I would be fine with that.
Then
Councilmember Walsh.
What's a garden? Isn't that a garden? I mean, outdoor irrigation of yards, gardens, golf courses. I mean, unless it's a flower garden, That's
Well,
the
that's your-
garden. I grow some carrots and some tomatoes and I bring them in, I eat them. That's my garden. I mean, I guess I don't approve. I don't agree with the amendment. I think the word's fine. If there's going to be a water emergency, everybody's got to stop watering their gardens, whether it's a flower garden or a vegetable garden. I mean, that's the whole point. You got to stop. Everyone's got to shut down, and we got to make sure the fire department has their water and the pressure's there for safety. I don't know. If you do
Madam
that,
Mayor?
I mean, you probably should put the word flower in front of the word gardens because it's going to be in there twice. Once prohibited, once allowed. But
Mr. Gilchrist, you had something?
Yes, I'm trying to get this across here. So we certainly could do what Councilmember Walsh just indicated, say flower gardens, as a means of trying to distinguish other types of gardens. But I mean, the language would, obviously the prohibition is gardens generally, but then it as is often done in statute, as then we narrow it in the next sentence. And so that would be the whole idea of the amendment if the council was so inclined. We do say gardens, but then we create an exemption specifically for vegetable gardens used primarily
Okay.
on the same property. So it's up to the council which way, or we could do both, frankly. We could say flower gardens and then further define vegetable gardens as being excluded.
Council, somebody's going to have to make an amendment. So Councilmember Bean.
Honestly, it's fine. It's whatever people want to do.
Okay.
I personally wouldn't use flower garden because I know, at least, personally, I know gardens that aren't used for food, but that don't have flowers. They're growing other plants for whatever reason. So I would like to leave the language as is, with an exception for, the growing of fruits and vegetables.
So can I take that as your amendment?
That's my amendment, yes.
Second.
Okay. All right. So we will go back to the beginning of this. We have an amendment to this. So we will vote on the amendment. Is that correct? I have to refresh myself. We vote on the amendment first. Is that correct?
That is correct, Madam Mayor.
All right. So with that, I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or should we go ahead with a vote? Seeing no further discussion, I will have the clerk call the roll. The amendment is to add verbiage on gardens, food and vegetable gardens or something like that, right?
Correct.
Okay, so clerk will call the roll.
Council
Oh, by
members,
the way, does this take a 4/5 vote also?
No, Madam Mayor, this would just be a
Just
simple.
a regular, thank you. All right, clerk will call the roll, please.
council members Bean,
Aye.
Walsh,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Engstrand,
Aye.
Edberg.
Oh,
All right, so the amendment passes. Now we will go back to the original ordinance with this amendment in it now. Do I have a motion to approve the ordinance?
so moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Just a quick comment, Madam Mayor.
Please.
Councilmember Jones, let's remember as we put together next year's legislative agenda, I hear you making a case that this shouldn't be a mandate from the legislature. I might agree with you on that. Let's add this to our list and investigate it. This is the kind of thing that we can go to the state and say, hey, this is dumb. We don't need to do this.
I mean, don't waste our time. I mean, I know everybody's thinking that, shaking their head. But this is, why even give it to us? If they don't ask us for a bunch of other laws, why
Yeah.
this one?
Let's add it to our list.
All right, point taken. So Mr. Gilchrist.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just for clarification to a point that Mr. Copy said earlier, as far as a 4/5 vote, just for clarification sakes, I think he may be meaning as to the summary resolution. Because I was looking in the statute, I do not see anything that requires
An ordinance. Yeah, we've never had an ordinance require 4/5.
So just to be clear to the council, this is a simple majority vote on the ordinance. The 4/5 is on the resolution to approve summary language, which is
Okay, which is in the consent agenda. All right, so with that, is there any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Council members Jones,
Aye.
Angstran,
Aye.
Walsh,
Aye.
Edberg,
Aye.
Bean.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes. Oh, I screwed up. It's a public hearing.
Oh, yeah.
It's an ordinance.
Publication.
And we also have the
Now
summary.
what do we do? Is there anybody here that wants to speak on it? Let's go there, Kara. Is there anybody that wants to speak on it?
Jan, if you would like to speak on this, we see you're in attendance. Otherwise, I don't believe anyone is here from the public wishing to
My
speak.
apologies. I got caught up in the amendment and forgot about the procedure. So there is no one to speak on the public hearing. Do we need to revote or are we okay, Mr. Gilchrist?
Madam Mayor, interesting question. I guess I'd be inclined to just have a motion to ratify the ordinance. I know that seems a little extra, but I suppose it wouldn't hurt just to ratify it.
Okay, then, may we have a motion to ratify the ordinance?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Clerk will call the roll.
Council members Bean,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Angstran,
Aye.
Walsh,
Aye.
Edberg.
Aye.
Thank you.
And Madam Mayor, we have the summary ordinance as well.
Summary.
But yeah, but that's in the consent agenda.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is.
That's something different.
Oh, that's the water supply plan. Okay, now we got to do this one. All right. Resolution. All right. So I need a motion to resolution establishing the title and summary approval of ordinance 21-4-2048. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Council members Jones,
Aye.
Angstran,
Aye.
Bean,
Aye.
Walsh,
Aye.
Edberg.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. Moving on to new business, 9A, resolution accepting bids and awarding contract for the 2021 water meter replacement project, City Project 2109. Mr. Copy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So the city began in 2016 replacing water meters that were getting of extreme age. They stopped recording correctly, very inaccurate. We were also having issues with meter reading. There, over the years, have become so many different systems out there that it was becoming very difficult to get meter reads completed. So at that time, a selection of a style of meter was chosen, and that process began. It was anticipated that city staff would be able to replace all of the meters over a period of time. However, about a year and a half ago, or thereabouts, Carrie can correct me if I'm incorrect, the SL Circo, who does our meter reading, came to us and said, we are getting out of the meter reading business. So that really prompted us moving forward with a completion of the remaining water meters in town. And the focus was the residential meters. Those are meters that we go into homes and we replace as part of our overall fees for water service. The commercial meters, which we also began replacing, we go in and those commercial accounts pay for their meters. They're much larger meters in most cases, special meters based on their service size. So the initial bid did not include the commercial meters, only the approximately 6,100 residential meters left. So on April 20th, we advertised the project for bids. On April 20th, we opened those bids, and the bids came in much, much lower than our original estimates that we had been tracking over the last several years. We had about $2.5 million budgeted to complete the residential meter changeout project. The bids came in at $1,741,211, which is a significant significantly below what we had budgeted. So as we started to look at it, we still had 400 commercial meters that our staff was going to attempt to get changed over the next, 12 to 18 months as they could work with those commercial accounts. And I'm going to make my recommendation, and then I'll turn it over to Ellen and Carrie, who will we'll have a little bit more discussion on these commercial meters. But so the resolution in your packet, staff would recommend adopting the resolution awarding the contract to Ferguson Waterworks in the amount of $1,741,211 for the 2021 water meter replacement project. So now at this time, Ms. Kinsvater and Ms. Heinecker, I'll turn it over to you guys to, we can discuss the commercial meters a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Yep. Sorry, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mayor, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So Carrie and I are going to do a bit of tag team here. But what we wanted to discuss was, as recent as today, actually, we're meeting with Bond Council to discuss the issuance of our bonds for this year's projects. And as was outlined in the memorandum, the bond, everything that's been prepared for the bonds, we were pushing for the $2.5 million to cover what we thought were going to be the cost of the residential meters. We do still have an opportunity to reduce the amount of money that we issue for those bonds yet before the end of the week. If we want to stay on project schedule, certainly if there's more discussion that's needed than we have tonight, we can push the project out a few weeks, and that is fine. But if we're going to stay on the current schedule, then we'd like to see if we can have some, perhaps some decision tonight, or at least direction in terms of the next steps. So as Paul had indicated, the bids came at about $1.7 million, and what was not included was the cost for commercial meters. Now, historically, our commercial meters have been paid for by the businesses in full at the time of installment, and the city doesn't get involved with purchasing them directly. That's how we've operated. It can be for some businesses a burden, which is why we've needed to wait in some cases for some of those businesses, because depending on the size of their meters, it can be up to $8,000. It's not necessarily a large commercial place of business. It depends on their operations. So what we're proposing for a few reasons, and is that we, right now the interest rates are very, very favorable for bonding. And number one, if we have the opportunity to roll in the purchase of these commercial meters, we would then provide businesses some time who need it, some time to pay off for those that are either experiencing some hardship, or if it's a higher cost for that meter. And then also, we do have, so that, and Paul, you and I, this is again something that was just, we opened it before as we were basically preparing this memorandum. But I know that there are also some administrative, and those are not calculated in. There's some additional costs associated with the administration of the installation that isn't part of that bid. And I didn't get a dollar amount from Paul precisely, and I don't know that you had it, but if you want to speak to that, yes.
So the estimate that we received, again, was, we rounded it to 500,000.
Yep.
It is slightly less than that. It includes both the purchase and installation of those meters. It wouldn't include any cost the city might incur as far as, changing accounts and those kind of things. But it does include the cost of the meter, as well as that installation that we would typically do instead of this contractor.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So having said that, what we're recommending is that we provide that opportunity for businesses to pay it off over a longer period of time, if necessary, by rolling that into the bond. And we do have, as we look forward, we have certainly, there is no shortage of some other capital improvements that we have in our water division, and it would save us the cost of reissuance of additional bonds next year for some of those projects. So for that reason, we're recommending that we continue to move forward with the issuance of a $2.5 million bond. As council may recall, we've have incorporated that bond issuance into the rate structure that's already been adopted. and are moving along with those same assumptions. Our plan would be to continue to collect that infrastructure fee to pay off the course of that debt service for that 15 years. And then once the life of the meters is typically about 15, hopefully you can get 20, but just at that point, we say 15 to 20 years, where then that money would then move towards the purchase of the next round of meters 15 or 20 years down the line. So that's the discussion that we included in that memorandum and wanted to hear from council about the direction of, as we consider, not number one, most importantly, looking at the approval of the purchase of the meters as represented by that bid of $1.741 million. So that's the motion that we ask you to consider, but then we need some discussion around the issuance of the $2.5 million, in which case we would wrap in the purchase of those commercial meters. And no formal action would be taken on that discussion tonight, but that would give us directions. So as we finalize this process and go out for that issuance that will come back to council at our next meeting, then we would have that direction tonight.
I would suggest we deal with the resolution and then have the discussion after we've got the resolution in place, if that's all right with the council. That's the way I'd like to propose we do it. So anybody have questions for Mr. Coffey on the bid? Councilmember Walsh.
Well, my question is bigger than the bid, I think. Just when I read the memo, I read in the newspaper that the city of White Bear Lake is going to receive, I can't remember what the final number was, $1.5 million from the next federal round of funding. We don't have it yet. I understand that. We don't have the rules yet either. I get that too. But one of the things that was pretty widely reported, I mean, it was in the slideshow you showed us, was water infrastructure was allowed as an expenditure with this next round of federal money. So my thought was, why the heck don't we pay for the water meter project with the federal money? Because it's a way to directly help homeowners and taxpayers. And then it's just an easy thing to do, because we want to help. We can take care of a city need and a homeowner need at the same time. So that's an overriding thought I had. I just want to hear the logic on why we wouldn't wait if we could wait and see. Obviously that I think the money's for sure going to come. It's not in the bank yet, but then we don't quite have the final documents on what it can be spent for, but it looks good on water infrastructure. So I guess
why wouldn't we just accept the bid and have it sitting there so we're ready to go? So we're shovel ready, so to speak. I mean, why not just go? We're going to have to do it one way or the other.
If that's the vote tonight, I'm totally with you.
I mean, that's what I take this is a resolution awarding the contract. Well, that doesn't mean we start it tomorrow.
Okay.
That's my take. Am I wrong?
No,
Mr. Coffey, maybe.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, you're correct in terms of what you're adopting tonight would be a commitment to purchase the meters. Then for discussion, because of our timeline with this bond issuance, we would like to have some discussion around, because right now we've been moving forward with that $2.5 million bond issuance to go towards the purchase of these meters. So I think that's what Councilmember Walsh would like to have more discussion on, as I understand it. Right, but that's separate from the adoption of the purchase.
That's what I understood, that this would be separate from that discussion.
Correct.
So if you're okay with that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so is there anybody else that has any questions or concerns about this bid? Then do I have a motion to accept the contract?
Move to approve.
Second, Jones.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Council members Engstrom,
Aye.
Edberg,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Walsh,
Aye.
Bean.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Now to the discussion on, you've raised the question, Councilmember Walsh, that could we use the CARES money? I think I don't know. I think we probably could, but I haven't seen all the rules. Ms. Heinecker?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and Councilmember Walsh. So certainly, and it is also my understanding that from what we've been provided, that we would be able to apply the receipt of, I think it's, at this point, it's between $2.5 and $2.9 million that we expect to receive from the federal government that can be used on a range of expenditures. And one of them, as was fairly clear, was water infrastructure. And I've not heard that anything's been retracted from that. That was in the bill itself. So I believe that is what you're referring to. And certainly, I think that would be, whether it be the water meters or other projects we have that are laid out in our capital improvement plan, that is absolutely a reasonable conversation for us to have, or the council to have, in terms of how we prioritize the use of those funds. I would caution us to make a decision to use them for the water meters at this time for a few reasons. One is that we have established already a method, and we could go back and we could take off that water infrastructure fee, but I believe that part of the discussion of developing that water infrastructure fee was also to build for just, our future infrastructure. But you could go back and look at a reduction of that would account for that debt service, absolutely. But we currently have that mechanism in place to pay for the debt service that we anticipated for the issuance of those bonds. So there would not be an additional, right now that's incorporated into the fees that are already being, that began beginning of the year, and there would not be any additional, no tax levy, of course, because it's part of our enterprise fund. So, so just to clarify kind of where we're at with that. But secondly, because we don't know exactly what the provisions are in terms of the very specific details within the guidelines that the Treasury Department will be releasing, we would like to see at the staff level, at least, to see what opportunities there are that might touch other parts of our operations or community or whatnot, and be able to have all of that information so council can weigh the use of that money, whether it's strictly on the water, in the water division, or are there other places that it may otherwise be more appropriate to serve. We just don't have those details yet from the Treasury Department. And also, if there's a decision by council after that discussion that no, we in fact do believe that the most appropriate use of this would be for our water division, the use of those funds can be extended through 2024. And we, without a doubt, and I asked Carrie, excuse me, I didn't ask Carrie, I pulled up the chart that Carrie had prepared for our work session that shows our water fund. I won't pull it up unless you'd like to see it. But our water fund is still, it's not significant enough to take care of the capital improvement purchases that we have over the next 3 years that we have aligned. So we would have to either raise rates to continue to do some of the future work, or we could use those monies to pay for that work between 2021 and 24, which is about, as I estimated, about $1.8 million at this time that we see over the course of a 3-year CIP. Those are based on last year's numbers. Carrie, I know you were doing some updating, so maybe I pulled some updates, but we're preparing for our work session in May, and I know there'll be a clear, definite, or excuse me, a more solid number for you. But at this point, over the next 3 years, the division looks at expending about $1.8 million because we have some significant improvements at our treatment plant that we need to consider. So there's absolutely opportunity to put it toward the water division. Because we have a mechanism in place to serve that debt service at this point, and we don't have all the details on how those monies can be spent yet, the recommendation I would put forth is that we wait for those guidelines and we have a robust conversation over all of those competing priorities relative to the way those monies can be spent.
So we have time before we have to act on that, right?
Well, so we have time before we have to make specific decisions about how to use that money, but I think to
but I mean for the bonding.
We don't, well, yes and no. We can, if we wait, we delay our project. So at this point, as it was outlined, we have till the end of this week to adjust our bond, our bond amount downward if we stay on the schedule that we had, planned to move forward with for the installation of the meters through the summer. I mean, so that was our schedule. We found out they were less expensive, and so now we're having a conversation over about the bond amount.
Mr. Copy.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, one thing I will add to the discussion is based on SL Circo, who currently does our meter reading, really wants to get out of the business by the end of 2021. I'll let Ms. Kinsvater jump in if she's heard any differently, but that's really the goal in getting going with this project in, as soon as we can here in May, in order to get over 6,000 meters replaced in just over 6 months is going to be a task in and of itself. So the quicker we can get moving with the project, obviously, if we don't make that deadline, we'll either have to figure something out with SL Circo, or we have to figure out how to get meters read with our own staff. So it will be a challenge there if we delay the meter project.
Okay. Mr. Jones, you had something.
No, I can't disagree with, I agree with Bill. I also agree with what Ellen's stating. I'm just looking for that money to do a double dip. So if we do have to bond for something, not only can we pay for something and that we don't have to borrow against it, that kind of to me is it benefits our taxpayers, our residents twice. So that's where it's like, okay, consider what we need to do that. And I would want to see that money qualify for bonding specific projects first, if that fits. But more than willing to.
But we have to make a decision by Friday. So how are we going to do that?
Madam Mayor, and I know Councilman Eberg has a question, just to clarify your question about that. If we need to move this discussion, and I'll look at Carrie for that timing. If we need to move this discussion to, so there can be more thought put to the question that Councilmember Walsh brought forward, we can do that out to our next meeting. It would delay the issuance of our bonds by 2 weeks, right, Carrie? I'm looking at Carrie here for some effort, and then, so just everything would be pushed back a couple weeks. Is that correct, Carrie?
I believe so, but I would need to run that by Ellers because they're the ones that are coordinating our bond.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Attorney Gilchrist, if you can wait. I believe so, but I don't know that for sure.
Okay. Mr. Edberg, you had something.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Kinsvater, based on other bonds that are being sold in the market right now, give me a range. What are we talking about for a likely interest rate on this money that we might be selling on Friday, or that we would be finalizing on Friday?
Well, Madam Mayor, members of the council, so what would be happening is that we're putting together the preliminary official statement for the bonds, and that's where we need to have the money, that the amount figured out. That goes out, and then the actual bond sale would be on May 11th. So the bond rates right now, the interest rates is about 1.5%. It goes up a little, comes down a little, but it's been averaging about 1.5%.
So the way I think about it is that we should retain the current level of the bond, finalize the documents as we have planned, move forward with bonding so that we do not delay the water meter project, come back and reconsider after we have all of the, at some point after May 11th, we will have a specific rate on what the cost of that money is. We will have time to reconsider once the coronavirus federal bill and any infrastructure bill comes in. We can discuss what the best and highest priorities uses of those dollars are, and that we can have a wide-ranging discussion later. So my sense is keep the same amount, issue it, and let's go forward.
Thank you. Okay, well, council, so we have
Member Walsh has a comment.
But just one question on that. I think that all makes sense to me, but are we committing, when do we commit to the borrowing, I guess? my simple point is, if we don't have to borrow, there are costs to borrowing. I mean, there are costs and administrative costs, there's interest rates, we pay interest. I mean, if we can do cash instead of borrowing, let's do that. So are we committing by Friday? I mean, if we make a decision on the dollar amount, are we committing to borrowing the money?
We're proceeding with, so what would happen is we have till Friday to commit to the amount that we're going to be sending out, but the council doesn't make we don't commit to anything till the council finally has a final exception of what we accept from those bond proceeds.
The only amendment I would have to what Councilmember Edberg said was, I'm okay with, proceeding as planned with the 1.7 million for the homeowners, the homes, for the water meters for the homes. It seems to me that other piece, of that business piece, that could wait. I mean, we were going to go slow on that anyway. We're going to do it in-house. So why not borrow less, I guess is my point. Let's limit our exposure on the borrowing as much as we can. Just do the 1.7 million. And then because we could hope to do the commercial water. What a great way to help our businesses. We've been talking about looking for ways to help our businesses through the pandemic. I mean, if we just give everybody a free water meter, not free, but from the feds.
Not free.
Why not do that?
Madam Mayor, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Welsh, just one thing to consider as we think about that proposal would be that we have already replaced about 170 of our commercial meters, and they've already paid for them. So I don't know over the course of how much time, Paul, but then, so there may be an equity issue about those that have had to pay. Just something to consider relative to those we have yet to replace.
Kept track of how much it was, just refund them.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, going with what Ms. Heinecker said, those were also began being replaced in 2016. So the last 5 years, those 170 water meters were replaced. The other thing to keep in mind is that even though our plan was to continue with the commercial meters in-house, one of the meetings that staff was going to look into is we still need to read those 400 meters with our own staff. So the quicker we can get them changed out, the more efficient we're going to be with our meter reading. So we kind of realized that we're going to either have to do something with part-time staff or our own staff to be able to continue to read those 400 meters until the time that they all get changed out. So the sooner we can get them replaced, the better off we are from a reading standpoint.
Okay, one more question and I'll give up. I like the idea of the robust conversation on the federal money. It's the right way to do it. We should all sit in a room and have that discussion. Is an option, can we pay off debt? Is there any penalties for early payment on some of this debt that we have outstanding? Let's say we go forward with the 2.5 million and we do the water meter project and we decide, and maybe it's, we pay off debt, you pick the highest interest rate, the most expensive debt. Is that an option for use of federal money, do you think?
Don't know yet.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Walsh, when we enter into our bond agreement, there is a term where you can't pay it off early. You have to wait until it's callable. And so it's probably not callable based on when we're issuing it now into maybe like 2030, 2031. So you can't pay it off until after
like a
that.
mortgage.
Do we have anything that's mature enough to pay off, or I'm just spitballing now, but is there any other debt that we have that's mature enough to pay off?
Not that.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Walsh, we review those every year, Ellers, as part of with our bond, and there isn't any right now.
Yeah.
So they had just gone through their review, but we do go through a review each year to say, hey, these could be paid up if you have money and are available to do that.
Thank you for indulging me, Madam Mayor.
Not a problem. It's good to have a robust discussion. So, okay, so we've got we've awarded the bid. We're going to go forward with the bonding as recommended, and then we will have a discussion when the CARES money comes in. Then we can sit down. We'll have the rules hopefully by then, and we can sit down again like we did the last time and discuss what we can and cannot do. Does that work for everybody? Okay. All right. Now I'm moving on to resolution accepting bids and awarding contract for the 2021 demolition of deliming facility, city project number 21-16. Mr. Copy.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, for those of you who are familiar with our water treatment plant, for many years, the city used a deliming facility, or basically a lagoon, a pond, if you will call it, where we would take our lime sludge that was used through our treatment plant, and we would put that in this undercover out in this lagoon and dewater it. A lot of that the dewatering was put into the sanitary sewer. Some years ago, the Met Council came to us and said, we can no longer do that. It was causing issues, and we weren't the only community doing it. There's actually a couple that are recently, I shouldn't say got caught doing it, but we're asked to discontinue doing it as well. So what we currently do is we use a tanker truck, and we truck our spent lime down to the St. Paul Regional Facility in St. Paul, where they dewater it, and then they get it out to farm fields and use it as a secondary purpose. So it's actually a better use of our resources in the end. However, what it has over the last 10 plus years have left this building that used to house this lime lagoon or dewatering lagoon. It's a very large building, but when it was built very short because it was basically just a pond in it. So over the years, a reuse of that building was looked at to potentially provide a cold storage facility. But as we started evaluating putting money into it, it had been budgeted before I had started here to look at putting a new roof on it and doing some rehabilitation in it. But once we really got to the nuts and bolts of it, the building is too short really to do anything. Any one of us could walk in that building and you're kind of bumping your head on the rafters. So in order to really make it usable, you would have to lift the whole building up. After you do that, plus you'd have to put new tin on it, new roof on it. It also is so large, it is kind of beyond the scope of what we need in that location. So really what we're doing, instead of putting that money into trying to rehabilitate that building, we've also gotten numerous calls from neighboring properties as far as the condition of it goes. So we have to do something with it. The ultimate goal at this point would be to demolish the current building, level the site out, and prepare it to build a new garage facility to house the water department's trucks, equipment, a lot of their materials that are currently stored outside. So that being said, we solicited quotes to have that building demolished as the first step. And as City Manager Heinecker had mentioned in our previous discussion, this is one of those short-term CIP items to build this new garage facility. So one of those items that we are looking at to complete on for the water department. So with that being said, staff would recommend adopting the attached resolution, awarding a contract to CMBR in the amount of $33,800 for the lime dewatering lagoon building demolition. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have it listed as 33. You said 32.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. $33,800.
Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to clarify. Council, any questions for Mr. Copy? Councilmember Walsh.
I don't have a question. I'll move approval and just say that when I first came on the council, Mark Birch gave me a little tour of the city and took me to that site. I was a little surprised and a little appalled that that thing was there. When was that? 6 years ago now. So I'm glad we're getting rid of that. It's not a proud building. And I mean, there were beer cans in there from kids drinking beer in there. There was birds flying in and out. I mean, we should raise this thing and level the ground and get ready for something new. Absolutely.
So you're making a motion to award the contract?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Edberg seconds.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Council members Bean,
Aye.
Engstrand,
Aye.
Walsh,
Aye.
Edberg,
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. Now moving on to the new 9C, the 2020 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. Mr. Edberg, what is it that you have issue with on this?
So I'll just 3 comments. One is I am not a fan of combining an independent audit with a city issued comprehensive report. They have 2 different authors. They should be separate and distinct. So I'm not a fan of combining the audit inside of the comprehensive report. The second item is, as a matter of principle, the independent auditor's report is a document of its own, and we should acknowledge it by acting on it separately to acknowledge that we have looked at it, reviewed it separately, because that is an independent view that we should have. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Anyone else? Comments? Okay.
So if you'd like, Madam Mayor, I'd be happy to make 2 motions in whichever sequence you want.
Kevin, comment to support
Councilmember Jones.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to comment to support your second point for sure. As far as it should be pulled and be voted on its own for sure. I agree with that.
Okay. But what about the first one?
I'm happy to vote. I'm happy to move acceptance of the report. I don't have an issue with the contents of the report.
Right.
I will say that the printed document in 190 pages is when most of the documents are side by side. If they were laid out in a printed document, you could follow across from the headings on the left-hand side and follow across on the lines to the right in the out years, and it would be readable. The vast majority of the tables are not. So I will be asking, if I'm here a year from now, I will be asking for that in a written form. But I don't have any other concerns about the content, the language, the results, the analysis, etc.
Okay. So anybody else? So you're making a motion to accept the report, is that correct?
I'll start by accepting the city's comprehensive report, and then we can move to the audit as a separate item.
Okay. All right, so he's offering a resolution accepting the city's comprehensive annual financial report. Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Councilmember Walsh seconds. Is there any further discussion on this resolution? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Council members Engstrand,
Aye.
Bean,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Edberg,
Aye.
Walsh.
Aye.
Thank you. That passes. All right, now, Councilmember Edberg.
I'll
What
move
is the-
acceptance of the audit of the independent auditor's report.
Let me just look at this. Oh, you want to do 2 separate resolutions is what
Correct.
you're telling. Okay. So you're doing the auditor's report, acceptance of the auditor's report, a resolution. Do I have a second to that one?
Walsh will second.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Council members Edberg,
Aye.
Walsh,
Aye.
Bean,
Aye.
Engstrand,
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. All right. Is there anything else we need to talk about before we move on to the consent agenda? If not, I'm moving on to the consent agenda.
Move to approve, Madam Mayor Jones.
Bean seconds.
I have a motion and a second. The clerk will call the roll.
Council members Jones,
Aye.
Walsh,
Aye.
Edberg,
Aye.
Engstrand,
Aye.
Bean.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to discussion. Options for in-person city council meetings. Ms. Heinecker, I'm
Yes,
assuming you're
Mayor,
gonna-
members of the council. So as you were told at the beginning of the meeting, this is our first attempt to really play with the mixed media that we now have in place in our council chambers. So I think there was a few initial tweaks, but it seems to be working well now. So what we're doing, as you may have noted, is Kara and are participating in the meeting via Zoom, but we also have the capacity of SEC camera person, Ian, behind the closed door over there to turn the camera on us as well, which I'll ask him to do in a minute, just so you can get a sense of sort of what it's like and what the chambers is. He had explained something about it being a Zoom and an SEC view that I wasn't able to understand until I actually see it. So I'll ask him to do that in a moment. But beyond that, so this is one thing that we needed to get worked out before we would say that we're good at coming back. But the other question, of course, is, how would we do this functionally? And Kara and I were able to confirm, and as council knows, it's nothing, I think that's news to anybody, but so if the council were to decide to come back and have in-person meetings, we would propose that we do it in a hybrid format to provide our residents an opportunity to still participate from home. So it would be, while it would be more awkward than we're accustomed to when we used to be in the chambers, it's very doable. And secondarily, with the mask requirement still in place, council would be asked to wear their mask during the meeting other than when they're speaking. And then we would have space in here to separate we would certainly make that 6-foot separation, but our seating would be different than what it looks like typically. So we would extend the council onto, probably staff first. The attorney and I would maybe go on to the side, and council can spread out more on the dais, but we would set it up so that we were sure to have that 6-foot distance. And there would be limitations in the council chambers to assure that anybody that was in here would be able to be seated with at a 6-foot distance from one another. Some cities, what they've done, and we would propose this as well, that we would ask people if they wanted to be participants to view the meeting and just participate in viewing it, we would ask them to do that at home. But if they wanted to speak to council or came for a specific item, they would be, of course, invited into the chambers, and then once that item was done, we would ask that they continue to view that online because that is available. So, it's going to depend on when council wants to move forward. I know that there's different levels of comfort in other communities as well. Some are meeting in person and some are not. So it just really depends on where each of the councils with each of their own conversations have landed. And so that I'm going to leave that conversation to council. I can tell you that we can make something work. It's not going to look like it did prior to the pandemic, but it can be accommodated.
Madam Mayor.
Troy
my
had a
problem is
question or
I
a
can't
comment.
see anybody everybody on this format.
Oh, Troy had a comment.
Madam Mayor, this is Troy.
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to add a comment from a legal perspective. So right now you're operating obviously electronically pursuant to the mayor's written statement. So that's an important distinction in my mind, not that there's much by way of law on this, but my mind is you could, as a council, come back to the chambers and still remain in an electronic format if you choose. The difference is, even though you're in this room together, you'd still have to do roll calls on everything. Or, Madam Mayor, you could sign a statement revoking your earlier statement, go back to in-person, but maintain that hybrid that city manager indicated to allow the public to participate. But if you do that, then all the council members need to keep in mind, you have to be in chambers then. There is no remoting in. If you're out of town for some reason, we would have to rely on the other statute that has certain hoops you have to jump through in order to participate remotely. So once that statement is revoked, my point is you all have to be in chambers, otherwise you can't vote.
But you just said we could do a hybrid model.
That's for the public, Madam Mayor. So the public.
That's for the public, so the whole council. Okay, well
about that, but council members, so What I'm saying is if you want to try it out without revoking the statement, you can do that. You can all come in. And one of my cities, for instance, has one council member that elects to stay home. And so they're staying in the electronic format. All the other council members and staff are in the room, but this one council member is remoting in. So if you have that scenario at all, I just wanted to let you know that there's various options.
So you could do that.
You could do that as long as you stay in electronic format.
Oh, I'm getting a headache. Okay, so if we come back into chambers and we all have to be there. No, I'm sorry, you're going to have to go through this again because I'm just not understanding it.
I apologize. I'm probably
No, it's not your fault. It's mine.
So the statement is the key thing. So as long as the statement remains in place, electronic meetings, that means not all of the council members have to be in chambers.
So why would you remove it? I mean, that would seem to me it would be simple just to leave it like that so people can do what they're comfortable with.
Well, that's, Madam Mayor, that's why I wanted to point that out. That's an option where, like I said, in some cities, most everyone wants to be there, some don't, and that's one way.
I've heard that from different colleagues of mine.
Then you all have to be in chambers.
Okay. Everybody got that? All right. All right. Anybody else? Thoughts? Mr. Walsh, I know where you are, and Mr. Bean is. So, anybody else want to? Councilmember Jones.
My 2 cents is until I don't want to wear a mask.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I want to be able to see faces and react. Although as much as our city technology, second point, has greatly improved, I still don't trust the duality of the system. And what happens if it goes down and we can't service one or the other? Is that meeting done? Kind of a city attorney aspect, meaning if we are broadcasting on Zoom and meeting live. And okay, so we have, and then third, we have an issue where 30 people, we go back into chambers. Are we covered with how many public people, whether it's they want to be there? Oh, we're full. You can't be 6 feet apart. You go home and watch it on Zoom now. Too many questions, too many going back and forth. And until Walls lifts the restrictions, and plus I just don't want to wear a mask. I want to see the reaction when Councilmember Edberg gets frustrated with me. That is actually very helpful, Mr. Edberg, and others. It is.
It is.
You know, whether it's friendly or, you know, argumentative, that's okay. So those are my points of just staying with Zoom as long as we can.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Madam Mayor.
Bean has one.
Yes.
So I know I brought this up at the last meeting. I was not considering the mask issue. That is a definite piece to
turn off.
At the same time, I don't know what the requirements are. I mean, if there were 2 people in the council chambers and they were at opposite ends of the council chambers, would
you're still indoors
to wear the mask? I don't know how
you're still indoors.
But the so this is something I would like to keep on the radar, to keep looking at, but
I think that's a good
point. Because of the mask issue, I probably would personally choose to Zoom in myself.
Okay, so I think that's a good possibility, a good way to look at it. We'll just continue to watch the trends and see if things, you know, pick up. But the mask, you know, not seeing people's faces on this, I can see your faces. And I can see when you've had it with me, but you know, I can't see that when you've got a mask on. Mr. Edberg, you had something.
I was just going to say that I do not have strong opinions one way or the other, and that I will go with whatever the majority of the council thinks is the best approach. My vaccination kicked in Saturday, and I'm feeling very good about that. So, but I can feel good about that in my basement or in council chamber.
Thank you. Mr. Walsh, did you have something? Mr. Engström, anything from either of you? If not, we'll just go ahead, I think. And
Sorry, my only comment would be, so I'm listening. So I'm hearing when the mask mandate comes off, but okay, so that's an important metric. I'm just looking for a metric. What's it going to take for us to get back to normal business so the public can come and interact and testify? And I think that should be our goal. So I'm hearing mask mandate, and then I'm hearing capacity limits. Well, I think capacity limits, I think we'd be fine. Very few meetings unless we have a firefighter, a fireman, or a police officer swearing in. We don't fill the building. So amount of people in the room, mask mandate is what I'm hearing. So just want to know the metric.
I think we just keep looking at, I'm concerned from the standpoint of absolutely not being able to see your face, because it does help to be able to look at somebody. And the social distancing for me is a big one. And, I think we just need to, and the fact that people aren't getting vaccinated is a concern. I mean, there's that issue too. So I don't know. I just think that we've got time and we can just watch how things are progressing and be ready to change if it works. If that's agreeable with you guys, then let's just do that.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
One additional comment. So I've been astounded that we do not have more viewers on our Zoom calls, more guests, more public members of the public participating, because based on what I hear and have seen from other communities, maybe they have better theatrics. I don't know, but there are some
of them do.
that have had significant increases in their public participation by Zoom. And I don't know the dynamics. I would just want to ask that so long as we stay on Zoom or stay electronic, that we just double check to make sure we're going the extra step to let folks know how they can participate, how they can observe, et cetera. And if we're already doing that, great. If there's some other things that we can do, I would feel better about that.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Point taken.
I just want
Ms.
to add,
Heinecker.
Madam Mayor, if I could, in response
Sure.
to Councilmember Edberg, one thing I do know, Councilmember Edberg, is that we do have not an insignificant audience that watches online without participating in the actual Zoom meeting. So we still play these live. They go out live through our website, and I know that Kara can describe that better than me, but if you go to our website, you can watch our meetings live as they happen. So, and we do have viewers. I know that by the calls I get the next day.
Well, yeah, I think they can watch it without,
Yes. Yes.
Being in. Councilmember Bean.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to double down on what Councilmember Walsh said, particularly with when the mask mandate is no longer there. I would want to do in-person meetings, but still, I would be okay with them being the electronic format so that those that did not want to be here would not have to.
That's a good point too. Okay, so we will just continue on. Ms. Heinecker and Kara will be monitoring this stuff for us, so they will let us know down the road. And we'll just check in on this periodically till we see where we can go with it. So I guess with that, I would move into communications from the city manager.
Yep.
Ms. Heinecker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Real brief updates, actually. I just wanted the council to know we did have our first meeting in March with the Welcoming and Inclusive Community Initiative with the task force that's meeting on behalf of the mayor's initiative. And it was a great meeting, and we've had our second meeting again in April, and we're meeting again just 1 week later to kind of continue a discussion we had last week. And I say that because we do have two of our council members who are actively involved in addition to the mayor in participating in those meetings. And as we move forward, we'll begin to bring back updates to council on some of the things that are discussed and activities that you can see coming out of that task force. The task force is in process of formulating and finalizing some of its work that you'll see come out of it over the next few months. But until we have that finalized, I'll just leave it at that. But I know at the next meeting we'll have some more to report. And also I would encourage the council and anybody who is listening to look to our city's website. Under community engagement, we have updates on both the Housing Task Force and the Welcoming and Inclusive Community Task Force. And then more specifically, you can look at the work of each and updates as we progress. But we're still getting some of that formatted so that it's easy for others to follow. But nevertheless, more to come on that, and we're excited about already some of the great discussions we're having. Same goes with the Housing Task Force. We've only had one meeting so far, but we have our already next week. It is a slightly larger group, not much, maybe by about 4 or 5 people. And the challenge, because we are doing them over Zoom, we're navigating, developing relationships so that we can do good work together, and also as it takes all of us on Zoom to get accustomed to how different people interact with it, our group is working into that, but I'm very excited about the work that's ahead. The first meeting for the Housing Task Force was very specific to primarily introductions, and then a bit of background, but we'll be getting more into the meat of things at our meeting next week. And Ann Kane will be giving you regular updates on that so you can see how that's progressing. Lastly, I put down the AV pilot project. We had a work session, and this is more for those who are listening than for the council, because the council had an opportunity at its last work session to hear from Daryl Tavola from AECom as an update on where we're at with that project. And I'm just very distracted because I'm seeing 2 of me right now. So this, it's in delay. I guess this is what it looks like to have both going on. So I'm just going to go like this.
Just put your hand up.
Yeah. Anyhow, I'm sorry. That was distracting, but it was good. Okay. So, no, it's good to know. And so when I say distracting, not in a bad way, Ian, he's helping us out to understand the technology. So I appreciate seeing that. But so for those that are listening, we are very close to finalizing a contract with MnDOT so we can proceed with that AV pilot project. Again, it's a shuttle bus that would be operating between PAI on Willow Avenue to down Willow and then down across on Orchard to the YMCA and back. It would be operating during the week from about 10 to 2. We'll also be doing some things at the South Campus so that the students there can integrate some of their classroom work with the technology of the shuttle. And I'm not going to give, I'll wait for an opportunity when we launch this to really get into a more robust conversation and discussion about all that this will involve so the public can understand what this pilot is about. We've been talking about it now for a couple of years, but it is coming and we're thrilled. And I can tell you that at some of the meetings that we have with different agencies now at either at Met Council or at the county, the word is getting out and people are really excited about this project around the state that are interested in this technology. So it will give give White Bear Lake another opportunity to shine. And we're grateful for the lead of AECom, who is our consultant on this project, and they will be contracting with MnDOT to move us forward. So more to come. And again, that was more for the benefit of those listening. Our council has been kept up to date on that with more detail provided at its work session. So that was that. I don't have anything more to add. And I don't know, Paul, if you have something you want to share with the council?
Thank you, City Manager Heinecker. I just have 2 items. First, from last week, many as well as the city, many organizations celebrated Earth Day, whether they did it last Thursday or they did it over the weekend, but we had a number of organizations that did some cleanup projects around town, and I wanted to recognize them. The Rotary Club picked up 13 bags of trash. They did Rotary Park, some stuff along Highway 61 as well as along the lake. We had a neighborhood group who picked up 8 bags of trash, cleaned up along Highway 96 and White Bear Parkway. The Lions Club picked up 16 bags of trash. They cleaned up Lakewood Hills and White Bear Avenue near that area. And we had Yoga Devotion who cleaned up West Park and the beach area. So thank you goes out to those organizations and neighborhood groups that did those cleanup projects. The other thing I will mention is the Parks Department was going to try to get it installed this afternoon. I didn't get a chance to drive by it, but the boat sculpture should be reinstalled along Highway 61. So if you're driving by there, it should be, they hopefully got it up without any issues this afternoon. Otherwise, it should be up tomorrow if you want to drive by and take a look at the new sculpture. So I'm excited to have that back for public view. So that's all I have for tonight.
That's good news. Thanks. Anybody else? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn, Madam Mayor Jones.
Walsh seconds.
Clerk will please call the roll.
Council members Walsh,
Aye.
Engstrand,
Aye.
Bean,
Aye.
Edberg,
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you all very much. We will see you in 2 weeks.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay.